Hi, my name is Ryan Pack.
And I'm Nicole Barlow.
And this is Soundtrack Your Life, where we speak with the guests about a soundtrack that is important to them. Today, our guest is film critic and writer Lex Brisuco. Welcome, Lex.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Really glad to have you on the podcast. You write for many different sites. I see a lot of your stuff on IGN. And we can also read your reviews on Rotten Tomatoes as well.
You pegged me right.
And today we are going to talk about the 2006 Sofia Coppola film, Marie Antoinette. So why are we talking about Marie Antoinette tonight?
Oh, man. Well, Marie Antoinette, I would say, is probably one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most iconic modern soundtracks. It's certainly one of my favorites. When you guys approached me about chatting on the podcast, it was definitely one of the first ones that popped into my head as one that I would want to discuss. And it just kind of means a lot to me, I guess. Like you said, these soundtracks tend to mean a lot to the guests. And it certainly does to me. I was doing the math earlier today, and I think I was 14 when the film came out, and so it was quite formative for me. I was sort of the same age as her when she was brought into France, and so it was very sort of, I don't want to say kindred spirit, because we know what's up with Marie, but at least like Sophia's version, maybe.
Did you also have to give up your pug in the woods at 14?
Right, exactly. Imagine if that was what we had in common.
Right.
Crazy.
Well, other than that, same though.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Same, but different. Yeah, no, Well, I just think that, the way that Sophia sort of allows you to kind of connect with Marie on a level of, at her core, this was a child who was brought into an unimaginable position that came with great power, something she had no idea what to do with. And I think that alone, paired with sort of everything visually that it's paired with and everything auditorily that it's paired with, sort of everything, it's a big feast. It really just sort of paints this picture of adolescence that is strangely very relatable. So that's certainly why I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, I feel like before things were a mood and a vibe and like so aesthetic and all of that started to pop up in the discourse, like she was really doing something kind of new with this film. She could have gone with a lot of different adaptations, and the lore behind this, I guess, is that she really chose intentionally a version of Marie Antoinette's life and her biography that really focused on all the stuff that isn't her getting her head lopped off, like all the stuff that we don't know about, all of this kind of depiction of her being this 14-year-old kid that gets to like take over a palace. And I feel like the music in the movie is very kind of reflective of that rebellious, crazy, this is exactly like how it would feel if you were in that position. Because she and we're the same, right?
Right, same. We're the same. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think it completely, sort of fits right in with that whole idea. And certainly for me, that was the kind of young teenager that I was. I was very into a lot of this music. I'm a rock girl myself. That's my chosen genre. I love everything, but that's where my loyalties lie. And so, having a scene in a movie where, the main character, our lead girl, despondently throws herself on the bed to the Strokes was very relatable to me as a child. You know what I mean? As a young teenager, that was what I was doing anyway. That's how I was acting anyway. Without
listen.
Right.
You have to throw yourself despondently on a bed.
It's true. But, like, the stakes were that, they feel that high as a child, and you feel like oh, I'm so exhausted by the world around me, and things like that. No, I think I agree with you. It's fully reflective of the rebellion of that age, and also sort of rebellion as she kind of finds herself in the role of Dauphine and later as queen and queen consort. Like, like you see her change so much in the movie. Like, I rewatched it tonight before this, and something that really struck me about it is how much she changes. She, in the very beginning, is so she's a child. She was loved well by her mother, and it shows in the way she treats people. And then, sort of as she becomes embroiled in everything that it means to be royalty and to serve your country in the way that she has to, and to serve someone else's country in the way she has to, she sort of free a little bit more of that rebellious side. She's willing to, say no, or to give attitude, or, play things the way she wants to play them. So I think also the music too is so reflective of that journey as well. We're so rebellious as children, but, I think as we grow up, we stay rebellious in a lot of ways because we learn about life and we learn what we want.
Yeah. Her mom is Marianne Faithfull in this film, so that probably doesn't hurt anything.
Yo, I forgot about that. And when when I was watching it tonight, I was just like, oh, would love her to be my mom. She just seems lovely as a, like would have loved to have gotten like a big hug from her. She just seems like
Yeah.
great mom casting.
Right? Just like totally great mom casting for this particular film. I would totally take like some childhood trauma if it was in exchange for having like Marianne Faithfull as my mom.
Let's stay on the casting. The stunt casting in this movie is very jarring, but like in a good way.
Rip Torn.
Rip fucking Torn.
Love Rip Torn as the king. It's so good to me. There's something so like, there's something so tender and sweet about his portrayal. It's really just like very much playing against type for him in a lot of ways, and I think he does so well with it. And I think he juggles like the complexities of the king from Marie's perspective so well, just because like obviously like when you're a child, when you're young like that, you're so, I feel like, susceptible to gossip. And so we really do see him so well through her perspective. And I think maybe that might be why we see him so kind. But I think he does such a good job of playing both sides of the coin. He's probably like one of my favorite of the stunt casts.
Yeah.
I think he's just like such a smart one. It just sticks out. It's a memorable role for him. Oh, Steve Coogan. Oh my gosh. He's the other one I would say.
Yep.
Is really good. I just love when they let Steve Coogan do anything serious, just because he's so funny. So whenever he gets a serious role, I'm like, oh, he's acting his little tushy off.
Right? Like, no, he's very... There's something, it's just like you said with Rip Torn and Steve Coogan, there's something about not only like Sofia Coppola's sensibilities around knowing how to soundtrack and doing all this kind of like via different mixtape exchanges, and like her sensibilities around casting are also really fantastic, because this is a lot of people that you would not expect to be in this film. There's a lot of hesitation about like, why would you put somebody like Kirsten Dunst in this role? It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel, of the period, but it's perfect. It works, right? And it's I think at the time was just so like, it really cracked something kind of open, I think.
Totally. I would definitely say like if they had, which I believe they plan to add, an Oscar for casting, I believe they announced that this year. If they had one back then, I feel like this would have won, just because it's really smart. It's everyone fits their roles so well. I feel like it's probably her best cast film as well. just because her partnerships, the people that she tends to keep working with, are so memorable and work so well. But yeah, I feel like, yeah, casting wise, this just, it knocks it out of the park. And like you said, it's certainly one of the core tenets of having a successful film that Sofia Coppola just really gets. She knows exactly what alchemical potion she has to put together to make casting work in the same way that she does with soundtrack. Because I feel like this soundtrack is certainly like just an alchemical potion that
Yeah.
she put together that just works perfectly, because it, you know, like we talked about, like the rebellious side of the music, but there's also a lot of classical, there's a lot of, you know, sort of muted tone, almost like, I don't want to say elevator music because it's much prettier than anything you'd hear in an elevator, but sort of like,
Right.
you know, just almost like tonal scapes, and you know, just everything sort of is really purposeful in this, like, which is something that also struck me, like rewatching it tonight, like, you know, just even lyrics
Yeah.
in some of these songs, too, like not even to be like so sleuthy or like nerdy or like really reading deep in, but you know, it really kind of shows that she really went in and, you know, was listening to these things and coming at them not only with a style but with a purpose. Because it's one thing to put a really great song in a scene that works, you know, but there's another thing for that song to mean something to the scene
Right.
and to the, you know, what's going on in the film at that moment.
Yeah, like Natural's Not in It is like such a perfect match, right? Lyrically, tonally, all of that post-punk that she puts into this is really great. And all of the new romantic stuff as well, which not only fits it, you know, sort of in like musical tone, but also in like these kind of like style sensibility sort of ways, which is
Can I
cool.
tell you guys a little story about
Oh yeah, you
Natural's Not
can.
in It?
Yeah.
Because
Let's do it.
it's a cute story. You guys will love it, I think. So this movie came out when I was 14, and probably know girls of a couple of years later usually have a party about it. So for my sweet 16, I went through a couple of ideas for a theme, and after a couple themes being vetoed by my mother for various reasons of this thing would be too expensive, like I'm a Beatles fan, so one of my ideas was, can I have like a Beatles themed Sweet 16 where we have like a Beatles cover band, you know, that like dresses like them and is like a whole thing. My mom was like, absolutely not. You know how expensive that's gonna be? Like we had gone to see ones that had played like Atlantic City, and I was like, we could get them. My mom was like, yeah, you're on crack anyway. So so after like some of those things got vetoed, I ended up doing a Marie Antoinette themed Sweet 16, and it was full on. One of my good friends from elementary school, her mother is a period accurate costumer and period accurate performer. I went to school in Central Jersey, and our town is has a lot of like Revolutionary War history, so we have like historical parks and things. So she was very involved in all of that stuff. So she actually made me a period accurate gown. It was 8 layers. Like I'm talking from like,
Oh.
you know, you see how she gets dressed in the film and how they put
Yeah.
that like initial like gown on her, and then there's other layers that go on top of that. So I had about 8 layers, like period accurate corset, the whole thing. My gown was modeled after several different gowns in the film, but it ended up being a hot pink and a gold gown with florals and, you know, drapery in the ruffles here and all of that business. My
Wow.
hair was sky high. I had birds in it, the whole nine. And I walked out. I was introduced, you know, to the party to Natural's Not in It, of course.
This is maybe my favorite story that has ever been told on the podcast, because I think you really, can I just say, I think you really underplayed the whole, why are we talking about this today? What does this mean to you? I think you might have undercooked that a little bit, Lex.
I have to say I was so excited to talk about it, but I wanted to talk about it surrounding Natural's not in it, because that I think is almost the best part of it, is like, for me it was so about the film. Like I mean, I've always been like interested in history and stuff, and I'd always been interested in Maria as a historical figure for sure, especially knowing how young she was and everything like that. But for me, it was all about the movie. It really was, like,
Yeah.
every aspect of that party. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it was like, at like a step above like a VFW. It was like not in any way like Marie Antoinette, like for realsies, like we are not rich, but like, we did the most expensive thing was my dress. My mom was like, okay, I understand that like the dress is really the thing. So
Did you have
but
macarons
like
though? Did you have like little profiteroles, like the macaron tower? Like, did
we
you?
had so what we did, yeah, so we had a bunch of stuff. We had my mom made like a 5-tier like beautiful cake. My mom and I actually used to like decorate like Wilton style cake decorating. So my mom made like this beautiful cake, very like, of like what they would have, like this very like opulent, ornate, like pink and gold cake. And all of our like centerpieces on all the tables were like cakes modeled after that. They were like these beautiful cake centerpieces that we had made. We had a bunch of gambling tables, which is very
Wow.
of the time. That's like what they would do. Yeah, like I know it was like gambling with like fake money. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah,
like
this is
it
like a
was
production. I'm just saying the level of thought put into this. Sofia Coppola would be
to
really
me.
proud of you. You should
I
have written her.
I
Still
wanted
can.
I wanted it to be like her birthday party in the film, because there is that birthday party in the film where she
Yeah.
turns 18, and that is exactly what everyone's doing. Oh my god, the best. I wish that was really my birthday party, because that is like an insane party. But like, that was what I was going for at 16 years old, was, just like dancing and let them eat cake in a, way of not, fucking with the populace of my country, and, just like having a good time and having, surrounded by sort of that vibe was what I wanted. And it wasn't, at the time I didn't know anything really truly about like the historical implications of like all of that stuff and whatever. It was really about just like the aesthetic that Sofia Coppola was able to cultivate on screen. It's just like very enviable, even in the modern world, of like, oh my gosh, like not a cell phone in sight. It looks like so much fun. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's just something about it that is just so enticing. And, it's in the color scheme, it's in, the shots of food and of, the like mother of pearl, like poker chips. It's just, all of that stuff. It's just this beautiful aesthetic that, was just so enticing to me. But also the idea coming out to that song too was such a
I
big thing
mean,
for
yeah,
me.
I love that you made that a moment that you just made a needle drop for yourself. Was your
Oh,
17th
fully.
birthday party like a masquerade ball and you came out to like Hong Kong Garden?
I want to say I did nothing, but my high school birthday parties after that were not really birthday parties, but I would get a group of like 10 of my friends together, 12 of my friends together. We'd split up into teams, and then we'd have a massive scavenger hunt all over like our county, basically. We'd get into 2 cars and go all around and do all kinds of stuff. One of the things was always like, get a picture with my mom at my house. So we'd always end up at my house, and one year like one team was already there and the other team like parked behind them so they couldn't get out, and then the other team drove over my parents' lawn. So those were my other high school birthday parties, but
Great.
Marie Antoinette was still better, I have to say. It was a time. It was a time. And yeah, just the music was a huge, like I said, it was just a huge part of it. I mean, we played a lot of things from the soundtrack at my party. I mean, like The Strokes, of course, like the I Want Candy remix, which is so good. Oh my gosh, Ceremony.
Oh,
Yes.
Ceremony. All-timer, an all-timer. It's used so well in this film.
It's honestly kind of like really get chills when I hear it. It was such a, also to take you to a different time in my life, it was such a staple. My freshman year of college, particularly, I happened to get randomly placed freshman year with a really great group of 3 girls as my roommates, and we all got along just so incredibly well. And they all had really great movie taste as well. And so Marie Antoinette was a favorite of ours. And it was something that we, watched kind of on the reg. And like Ceremony it was like if we were drinking, Ceremony.
Uh-oh.
Like it was like, sort of just like this piece of just like a relic. It really was. It was just this thing that we all like really revered. And it, a lot of it came from the way it was used in that film and the feelings that it elicits in the scene that it's used in, because it's used, at her party. And, I mean, it's just such a, like, just elating scene. It's similar to the way that I feel like Hong Kong Garden is used as well. When they go to the masquerade ball, like there's just like this feeling of just like, I don't know, like you're walking on air almost. The way it's used, it's just so seamless and so just develops the whole of the scene. And it really just sort of guides you to the way that, Coppola wanted you to feel.
Right.
This sort of magic in the room. Like, one of the things that really struck me about watching the scene with Hong Kong Garden this time around was how it really feels like, and, they are, I mean, technically, yes, but, they wouldn't be in real life, but it feels like they're actually dancing to it. The dance that they're doing in the scene where it really sort of not that it breaks down, like the breakdown is there, but, it sort of cracks into the actual song past the string intro. The music really kicks in, the rock of it kicks in. And it really feels like while they're doing this very choreographed, very like sort of period accurate dancing, that it's actually in time with this Soxy and the Banshees song. It's like very just like, there's a magic inside that. I don't know. It's just this colliding of worlds, that I think is really at the core of this movie. And, the soundtrack is a huge, massive part of how she was able to achieve that.
And this movie gets brought up, the soundtrack for this movie gets brought up in the same breath as A Knight's Tale a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Because The Knight's Tale does, the same thing with these like anachronistic, like contemporary tracks.
Totally.
Against a period film. But I think the difference here is like it's kind of in the curation, and it's in like the fact that it never feels like a stunt. It never feels like they're doing it to shock you in any way, or it is like a perfect match and a perfect marriage between like scene and song, which you don't get very often.
Even down to like, I would say like when you said that, what flashed in my brain, like how you're saying it never feels like a gimmick or like that they're putting something on or whatever. Like it flashed the scene that flashed in my head is the coronation when they use oh my gosh, Plain Song by The Cure. Like, oh my goodness gracious, that hit me like a ton of bricks tonight rewatching it, because that I think is like the best example of what you just said, because I think that could come off so cheap if not handled properly.
Sure.
And I think it like actually does the complete opposite. There's this just like feeling of the song just absolutely showering upon Kirsten Dunst and Jason Schwartzman as they come down the steps after their coronation is finished. It's just absolutely perfect. Like it's hard to overstate how well that scene plays when you put that song on there, because it could be so much, but you really understand sort of the stakes of it, especially like right before that, like with all of their, like all the men in waiting are there and everything, but they sort of have that moment together where Louis just has like a quick prayer and says, you know, like, watch over us, we're too young to reign.
Yeah.
And, you know, and like, so it's wonderful moment where the stakes feel so present, yet you're feeling sort of the youth of it all too, you know, through The Cure, which is, I think, just such just skillful filmmaking. It's really just so smart, you know? I think she has a lot of moments like this in a lot of her films, you know? I think we're really just, sidebar, I think we're really lucky to have Sofia Coppola. She's certainly one of the Nepo babies that's earning her keep.
She's on the list of acceptable Nepo babies.
She really is. And 100%. I do have a list, and I really feel like she is just, we're never taking her off. She's just really, really smart. And I mean, listen, if my, you know, family was that, you know, entrenched in this art form, I would be embarrassed if I wasn't good at it. You know?
You also have a budget for your Sweet 16. I'm just putting that out there.
The budget for my Sweet 16 was bigger than the budget that Sofia is normally able to get for her films. No, totally not. Like, not even close. But she talks all the time about having a hard time getting enough money to things, which is really sad, especially with her track record. Yeah.
And for these songs too, there's a great little anecdote about, there are 2 Cure songs in this. There's Plain Song and there's All Cats Are Gray. And there's a great,
that's the closing number. So good.
So good.
I have something to say about it too. Finish your thought.
Yeah, well, so there's just a little anecdote where they kind of had to scrape tooth and nail to get the rights to these songs. These big songs, very known songs from very huge artists. And Robert Smith actually wrote to his record label to say, no, I'm going to take less royalties for this, just so that I can be in this film. Because at this point, Sofia Coppola is fresh off of Lost in Translation. She's garnering all this respect. People really love her, and they're excited to be part of her film and part of her soundtrack. So I think that's really cool. I think it's cool that she was able to, she and Brian Retzall, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that were able to, he's the music supervisor on this, that they were able to make this happen. I always love that. I kind of love that combination of like excitement on all sides.
A lot of people in sort of the rock space really respect her. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from, is sort of this like her, you know, connection to that world and to sort of that like sort of independent New York scene and stuff like that, where just like, I think, you know, in those early days, people were willing to, you know, give her, you know, a piece of what they had, knowing that she, you know, would treat it right, you know, which I think is really special. And I mean, for The Cure to wanna, you know what I mean? Like, that's just like legendary. So I feel like that, you know, said a lot about the way that she goes into her soundtracking, you know, with such intent and care. And I mean, like, you know, nowadays she's married to one of the guys from Phoenix. And I just feel like, you know, they've always been so like, I mean, I remember those days when I was like, you know, a young little rock nerd, and I certainly had a Phoenix phase. I think there was like, you know, some really great stuff from them in the early days, and I just think everyone in that band is just so musically just skilled, and so, you know, having that those impulses to go into you know, working in this way with films just feels so natural for someone from that group. And so, you know, now that she works a lot with her husband on this kind of stuff, it's just, you know, I feel like we expanded on, you know, her sort of, you know, radar for what works. Because I don't know, have you guys seen Priscilla? Not to take us away from Marie Antoinette,
I just watched it recently, and it's
okay, yeah, great. That's honestly, like, I feel like it's another one where like the soundtrack is so purposeful and, you know, is really coming at things not just from an angle of style, but from intent. And, you know, that was something that she worked on with her husband. So I feel like, you know, she's kind of like really very much compounding on, you know, the things that she, you know, does well every time. You know, she continues to, you know, sort of get a bit better at it. You know what I mean? Would I say like that the Priscilla soundtrack is better than Marie Antoinette? I don't know about that, because Marie Antoinette soundtrack is pretty iconic.
It's a
But
high bar.
it's good though. The Priscilla soundtrack is great. You know, when I saw it, I mean, you know, the first time having all of those needle drops, you know, play for the first time for me, I mean, I was pretty damn satisfied. So, you know, I just think she, you know, has a great impulse in that way. But I did want to mention about All Cats Are Gray, just because I did a little, like, you know, digging on things on my own before the pod, trying to be a prepared girl. You know, I don't try not to come empty-handed when I'm invited to do something so lovely, you know? So earlier, I think at some point about how, like, a lot of these songs, like, the lyrics are so purposeful as well, which is really interesting because, of course, you know, you're going around and you're finding things that you want to put into the world that you created. And, you know, it's one thing for them to work tonally, but it's another thing for them to also work when it comes to the thematic elements of that piece itself as a piece of art. So, something that I thought was kind of interesting about the lyrics to All Cats Are Gray is that All Cats Are Gray is used right at the end, right after you sort of see that image of Marie Antoinette's pillared bedroom after it's been stormed by the people of Versailles and, you know, of the surrounding areas who are, you know, fit to be tied with the situation that's playing outside of the kingdom's walls. And the lyrics here are just so I feel like indicative of what that space must feel like to be so stuck inside of that terrible situation on Marie's front, but also, you know, on the front of, you know, she's not someone who necessarily, I think, was out here trying to do wrong. So that was something that I thought was sort of interesting about the lyrics there. Like, I never thought I would find myself in bed amongst the stones. The columns are all men begging to crush me. No shapes sail on the dark, deep lakes, and no flags wave me home. In the caves, all cats are gray. In the caves, the texture coats my skin. In the death cell, a single note rings on and on. So I think it's like also this like great like sort of signaling to what's coming, signaling to the things that, you know, weren't necessarily needed to be part of this, the things that were sort of letting you, you know, remember at the end of this. Because I think something that also is really interesting about this film is that you forget, I think, the whole movie until like the last like 15 minutes. You're like, oh yeah, right, she totally got her head cut off in real
Right.
life,
Oh,
you
so right.
know.
Everybody hates her at this point,
Yeah,
and it's a
yeah,
problem. Yeah, you do,
yeah,
because I think it's like, you know, she does a successful job of getting you invested in this very insular world. And that is, I think, a real feat of this film. And there's a real boldness in saying, like, no, we're going to explore her as being a girl in over her head. And that's kind of like
yeah.
the exercise of this movie. Not like, you know, all of the political, you know, Revolutionary War stuff. It doesn't really concern itself with facts. And it gets
Right.
flagged for that, but like, who the fuck cares? Mission accomplished.
I think here's the other thing too, is that like, you know, let's also be real. Like, we are so far removed from that time period, just like time wise,
Well, nobody knows.
that nobody
Nobody.
knows whether or not she was out here like let the meat caking with a sense of like, you know, like die bitches. Like, no,
Yeah.
we don't know. Honestly, that's something that like a young person who doesn't really know their ass from their elbow and has been put in a position that they had no business ever being in, that's what someone like that says.
Yeah, you
Like,
don't want to
you
know
know,
how
like
many
a let
rabbit
them eat
holes.
cake.
I
Yeah,
went down
they
so many
don't.
rabbit holes trying to figure out why they didn't consummate their marriage. There's so many different theories that I'm not going to detail here, but look them up. Google them, kids.
There are a lot of different theories, and I feel like honestly there's so many, right, that there should be so many theories because we're so far removed from it. So I think like that's, you know what I mean? Like I think that that's also really what's kind of like an interesting, element to this is that, we just don't know.
And let's give her credit for totally being like, yeah, who the fuck cares? Unlike something like Hamilton, where
Yeah.
people are like, wait, that was not historically accurate. And well, it's like, well, it's not supposed to be.
Yeah,
It's supposed
showbiz,
to be a
baby.
musical. And it's the same thing, but at least with Marie Antoinette, like she takes these liberties, so it's very clear, like, this is my interpretation of things. You know, we have Kirsten Dunst speaking like plain English, and that's on purpose. Like, because, and that's
No
and
one's
it's
got a
fine.
French accent to be found. No French accents to be found.
I read
Yeah.
a thing. It was Coppola was like, oh yeah, well, Kirsten Dunst is German and Marie Antoinette was Austrian, so I felt like that kind of works. And I'm like, stretch, but like it's cool. Like she's
But it
still
almost works
American.
better
That
this way.
I think it does. I mean, I think it totally works better this way.
I have always had an affinity for when someone takes sort of a period piece and allows like sort of the plain American tongue to come out. I know that might sound like a little like, boring, but like, I don't know. I think when I grew up, like, we were all into like Romeo and Juliet, and that's
Oh yeah.
just, a bunch of Californians doing Shakespeare, and it's just so seductive. And, so I think I've always liked that element of Marie Antoinette that, we've got Kirsten Dunst with, her American accent, Jason Schwartzman with his American accent. We've got
Rip Torn.
right, doing just like his
Whatever.
normal ass voice. Yeah. And
Asia
like,
Argento is there doing something, doing a thing.
and like all of her court has like really strong like English accents. I think it's fun. I don't mind. Like a couple, what was it, 2 years ago when Tragedy in Macbeth came out with Denzel Washington, I wrote a piece about how much American voice doing Shakespeare works, and that we don't give it enough of its due, and we don't use it enough, because there's something just really kind of like everyman about it that just opens up the text in a way that makes it just so accessible. And I think that the voices in this do the same thing in a lot of ways, because you're asking people to come with you to a time period that is so different from their own.
It
And a
opens
lot of
up the
people
text.
don't.
Yeah.
Totally. And a lot of people don't like period stuff too, you know what I mean, that are just like, that's not my bag, and then but when you sort of kind of open it up a little bit and give it this sort of accessible texture over it, we've got the Converse in the shot, that changes things. It allows people to sort of get next to the work in a way that they may not have been able to without that sort of entry point. The soundtrack is the same way, because it uses such
right
modern music, on top of using a lot of orchestral pieces and things of that nature. But the Strokes are in there. I mean, it's hard not to
Apex
connect
Twin
with
is
that,
in it.
especially yeah, exactly, and especially when it came out too. You know what I mean? Like 2006. It's hard not to be able to just connect with that immediately and find that as an entry point, if you're someone of that era.
Yeah, I was gonna say that near the beginning of the film, where it's like one of the first days that she's in the palace, and they put all those different like garments on her just as she wakes up, and Kirsten Dunst just says, "This is ridiculous," and then I don't know what the title of the servant is, but he goes, "No, this is Versailles," and she says it with the French accent, and it kind of, and at like that's the point where like I kind of understood like what was going on, because at first it's like, okay, Kirsten Dunst is not speaking with any accent, and she is it doesn't seem like she's acting within this period at all, but when that moment of the film comes in, then it's like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah,
it's this like isolation tactic that, Coppola, I feel like, probably was like, this is a smart thing for us to do, because it innately also so early in her journey in a different place than everyone else in the court, because like I said, the majority of the women in her direct family, the princesses of the blood, the friends of the court, the ladies in waiting, like kind of everybody has some sort of European accent, and then you've got her. So it's just like this great, I think, like just very base way to isolate her. And it forces her to figure out a way to become comfortable in an uncomfortable world that she's been thrown into. I mean, they made her like give away her dog and all that. She's just totally alone, coming into the French Empire. And so it's like just like such an easy way to just completely ostracize her from everyone, which is sad. Don't ostracize her. I feel bad. She's so young.
She keeps asking Steve Coogan for when the dog's coming back.
When I was watching it.
Yeah, the dog thing it hits hard. And that is a true story. That did happen.
It did, which is like so sad to think.
Heartbreaking.
Like, poor gal. Yeah.
But again, what a smart thing to hone in on as a storyteller, to say like that's going to get people to identify with her and to recognize her as this, this foreigner in a strange land that's giving up everything to do this huge big thing that's completely over her head is pretty wise.
So much with so little, just having that as part of things, and also Kirsten Dunst's performance during that particular scene. The partnership of those, two things is just so successful in doing exactly what you just said, really, really laying the groundwork for exactly what kind of, world she's embarking into and what it's going to take for her to navigate it.
Yeah, she's really magnetic in this movie, and very much in competition with Jason Schwartzman's like eyebrows, I feel like.
Oh my God, yeah.
His version of the action.
There's one moment where he's like going to get in bed with her, and like I don't even like what's going on with his haircut. It's like a full on like
so
2 side bangs, but then it's like not like short, like it like comes to like kind of the shoulders, but seems like kind of shorter in the front than it is in the back. I'm like, what's going on? Like,
I know. It's not great, and I love Jason Schwartzman, but you can kind of see why Jamie Dornan, like that might happen.
I kind of feel like, to get him on board for this film, because they're cousins, Sophia was like, don't worry, like they're gonna be the most unsexy scenes, like you're not gonna feel awkward in front of me, like don't worry.
Yeah, we won't talk about this at Christmas, like it's not gonna be a thing,
right? It's behind us.
But like, if you were a filmmaker and you had a cousin who was like also an actor, would you kind of be like silently laughing to yourself, like, oh yeah, I grew up with that kid, I saw him in diapers, and now I got to cast him as this like really goofy,
and I gave him like a really ridiculous haircut. Yeah, 100%.
It's kind of funny to think about. That's some cousin revenge on like another level.
It's great. Yeah, I'm sure it's like great blackmail. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. This soundtrack it does get brought up a lot as like the one of the greatest soundtracks, you said, in contemporary filmmaking, one of the greatest soundtracks ever. It's kind of like an embarrassment of riches. There's so many great songs, so many great needle drops. Do we have favorites? Like if you had to choose a favorite music moment?
I'm pulling up the soundtrack listing so that I could get a fair image of everything, because I feel like I can never, like, when I am asked questions like this, I always miss something that I'm like, oh, I would have picked that.
We'll give you a minute to think about it. I wanted to jump into there's a band on here that sounded super familiar called the Radio Department.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I don't remember them in 2006.
It's funny because I don't either, but they sound so of the time. They sound like something I would have listened to, which I think is so interesting. And it's also funny because I think 3 of their songs are used, and 2 of them are used particularly underscoring scenes with Louis and his friends. I think both times actually they're out riding
Off
on
hunting.
horseback.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really interesting because the music is so it's so like, mid-aughts hipster guy with a band
Mm-hmm.
music. And to me, it was very, which I don't know if I ever truly clocked this. So this might be a new realization specifically for Soundtrack Your Life. But but I realized like it very much, sort of allows you to see him kind of almost in that archetype in a way, because he kind of is a little bit of a like, I mean, he is also, quite nervous and doesn't know what to make of all of this, marriage with her. But he kind of also like has a little bit of like almost like a fuckboy vibe. And, when you kind of like, like you're like, why do you keep like rejecting her? Like, what she wants to do, and why she wants to do it. You're not a moron. The class structure is not like a secret right now. Like, what has to occur in order for her to be in a secure place. So it's kind of like, why do you keep rejecting her? Like, after a certain point, like, I get the nerves, like, they're young, but after a certain point, because it took them a while to have children.
A long
It wasn't.
while.
Yeah, it wasn't like like 6 months he would like hook up with her. Like, no, it was quite some time. So it's kind of like, you're kind of like, why are you doing this? So it sort of struck me this time as like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of getting like the archetype of like, if we're really putting this in like the mid-aughts and we're putting this in, this sort of like Strokes era of like golden era of rock, that is the archetype, like for a guy of that era, that's certainly like, a huge archetype. So it was kind of interesting as well to sort of think about him in that way, because it again modernizes things and gives you sort of this angle that, you may never have thought of, and like another way to sort of give people an entry point into a story that might feel really archaic, if told in another way. So I thought that was interesting too, because I was like, I love this band. This music is great. These 3 songs I'm obsessed with. And it's funny because I feel like I've never really heard them before.
Well, I also feel like, and this is just a guess, I don't have any evidence of this, but I feel like maybe she said to herself, like, we kind of need some dream pop for this. Like, we need what Air was doing
Oh,
for Virgin Suicides, but we'll just pick like this Swedish band and have them like have some moments in this that feel a little bit more like atmospheric or
Because real
something.
estate doesn't exist yet.
Because real estate doesn't exist yet.
exactly. I think that's fair to say.
Different era, it would be a different band, but I think for this era, it was like, okay, this makes sense, and it feels indie. I think there's something about like Jason Schwartzman where he just like he can't escape the indie, he just lives so deeply hipster, like of that.
His brother is also of Rudy, so he really cannot escape.
That's
Well,
right.
Jason is
right.
a Phantom Planet.
And Phantom Planet, yeah.
And true, yeah. I always forget about that.
We talk
he's
about
not
him too much on this show because he's in a lot of movies that have a lot of really good indie soundtracks, right? So he comes up a lot. He's like our patron saint. We should just have him like in the bio at this point.
Get him on the show is really what we need.
Oh,
we
yes,
need to dream big.
That's when we called him a fuckboy.
Not him.
No, he'd probably be like, that's cool. Like,
you're like awesome.
Everyone keeps on thinking that I'm like 17 years old and in Rushmore still.
Oh, he is kind of perpetually. Oh,
boyish. It's kind of a good thing maybe now. I don't know. I love
well,
him.
I have to say he looked really good in Asteroid City, so it's not like he like needs to like
the beard?
shed some age. No, he looks good. It was like one of the first times where I was really like, oh wow, Jason Schwartzman looking straight up sexy. Like, okay.
Lex just did the thing where she like put her hair behind her ears a little bit and like did the glasses, like the little on the side of the glasses. So good.
But that's how I felt. I was like, oh my goodness, okay, go, yes.
I feel like there should have been some Interpol from whenever Rip Torn was on the screen.
Oh, you know?
Interpol. Honestly, Interpol is one of the only bands probably that could have made this soundtrack better.
We need
Maybe
some of
she
that
felt
meeting
like
in the
I got
bathroom
the
energy.
Strokes here. I can't have the Strokes and Interpol. I feel like that's like too much of a
Maybe
too much
Too
sleaze
heavy.
in one
All
place.
right.
Maybe. I
I'm
don't know.
annoying.
Maybe there's a cut
That
scene. Maybe there's a cut scene with Interpol. I can see it.
okay.
I see the
I don't
vision.
know. Unfortunately I grew up stuff, so I still listen to if I'm honestly being honest. If I'm honestly being honest. But for real. So I'm like, yeah, throw the Strokes and Interpol in there. Why not? Like that's my iPod on a regular night. No, but
It's a
it kind
deeply
of is.
millennial soundtrack. It's like it's very satisfying to listen to it. I think if you're of like a certain generation, like obviously this hit you at like a very critical point in your development. Like it's probably
Critical
hardwired.
mass.
Oh, are we
So
still waiting for your
hardwired.
favorite needle drop?
All right, so what is it, Lex?
Oh
I want to hear
yes.
Ryan's
Okay.
answers too.
My favorite needle drop. Okay, I'm looking at the list. Honestly, might be because, like, okay, so like, part of me wants to say like one of the heavy hitters, like Our Ceremonies or Our Naturals Not in It, or honestly even Hong Kong Garden, but the I Want Candy needle drop is
It's
just,
fun.
and it's honestly, I feel like it's the heart of the film in a lot of ways. It's, I think it's one of the things that people remember most about the film. And I just think it gets to the core of what Coppola's intentions were with this film, which were to show you what it means to be growing up and not grow up too quickly. I think it just kind of hits the nail on the head, just like perfectly underscores the visual. I mean, everything visually in that scene is just, you could eat it, you know? It's just absolutely a feast, for the eyes. And so I feel like I think that's it. I think that's the one. Even though there are several that, like, honestly could be my answer. But I feel like that's just, like, is sort of the heart of the movie in a lot of ways. So I feel like that has to be my answer, I think.
I think it's a great answer. I think also, for me, I don't even really know if I like that song independent of this film. Like, I'm not sure I would just like slap it
Right.
on, but it works so well that it makes you like it.
I completely agree with you on that. Because I actually kind of, now that you say that, it is kind of a little annoying, right? Like, it's not,
Totally.
it's not one that I would like throw on to be like, oh, I'm gonna like listen to this. I think of the time when it, came out, like, I think it made a lot of sense that, people were sort of listening to it on repeat. It was a huge hit. But now I feel like I'm like, yeah, no, we've sort of surpassed the need for I Want Candy in the world of 2024. But I think in Marie Antoinette time and should not be messed with. It's perfect.
Right. I agree with you. We're living in the
Yeah.
post I Want Candy world.
We kind of are a little bit.
That's
I don't
fine.
know.
Brian,
Declared it for some reason.
what's it going to be? What's your answer?
My answer is going to be the Strokes needle drop because I really didn't think it was going to work.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
It's so short too. I know exactly what you mean. Because it's actually so funny you say that. Because I literally watching it tonight, I was like, happened. I was like, oh, where is the Strokes needle drop? I don't remember. Is it coming soon? And it's so sort of innocuous. You don't expect it. You don't. It's very like she's just very bored.
Yeah.
Seconds before that. That's really all that is the impetus of that needle drop is like, I don't want to be in this room anymore with you people. That's
flopping
the
on the
impetus.
bed. You're flopping on the bed, right?
Yeah. Totally. And like right before that, she like, we see her leave the room, and right before that, she's just like scurrying down the hallway, like, get me to my bedroom. I can't stand these peoples no more. It's really kind of funny. You're right. It sort of doesn't feel like it should work. But I think like there's just such a crooning and a longing to not only that song, but to Casablancas's work, and his vocals, that I think just sort of encapsulates that feeling that
Yeah.
she's feeling, and it illustrates it so well to the audience. And that needle drop is quite short in the grand scheme. I feel like it's no more than like 30-ish seconds.
It's really
That little
short.
scene, yeah. So I feel like, it does so much heavy lifting with so little.
Yeah, and I think music kind of takes the place of dialogue. It's not like a dialogue heavy movie. There's not a lot of scripting. It's mostly atmosphere and these songs that are carrying you through the story.
And I feel like, not a bad move with something like this, especially like wanting to do your own interpretation, because I think she, really loves to tap into this, idea of girlhood and what it means to be a woman evolving. I think like, she has this innate ability to kind of feel out what a moment means to that person in that moment and how to illustrate that in more ways than just dialogue. And I think like, when you're in a period piece, like, it's very much, it gets difficult when you start, trying to be very period accurate in the dialogue, because then, you end up digging a hole for yourself, and then you may, turn into a Robert Eggers, scenario.
That's such a read. It's such a Robert Eggers read. It's fine. We're never going to cover him here.
No, I love him to death, and I think he's wonderful. I literally love The Witch. It's totally not a dig at all. But I think, like, that could be quite maddening for filmmakers. You know what I mean? I'm sure he loves that process. That's why he did it, and he did it well. You know what I mean? So I'm sure he loved that. But I feel like it can get, very crazy when you start going on that path and,
Right.
innately wanting to do something that isn't necessarily period accurate, and that's more of an interpretation, then that opens you up to also treating these moments like, moments of feeling rather than moments of action.
Yeah, and to go back to Ryan's pick, which is the Strokes, Whatever Happened, there's something very like petulant about that song. It's very
Yeah.
like, I want to be forgotten. I don't want to be reminded. It's very like Fainting Couch. It's very melodramatic to me. There's something
Yeah.
that fits really well with it, 'cause it's angsty and it's like, bleh. It works in the moment, and
Yeah,
it shouldn't,
Julian
because it's
Casablancas.
probably, yeah, exactly. Like that's his whole vibe. That's his whole thing, and it works. And even though it's like the most contemporary to when the movie was made, probably thing that you can pick out and be like, oh yeah, that's 2006, right? You know that it's 2006 when you hear this song.
No, totally. And it's like, it's got this great, like, sort of, it's like I am pitching a bitch quality about it, like where it's like very like like the way the needle drop of it is like, when the beat drops there, it very much is a like explosion of sound, an explosion of chords, an explosion of vocals, an explosion of drums. So, it's just like you said, I think it like works in this petulant manner as well, that it's so, intrinsic to the heart of the scene, especially because this is a later scene in the film. So she, has been in this world for quite some time at this point. And like I had said earlier, like, a lot of the music really taps into the idea that she, sort of comes into her own throughout the course of the film and feels, comfortable giving attitude and,
Pitching
not.
a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Pitching a bitch. So I feel like he really works with that, because that's like very much how I feel like that song is. It's very much like a tantrum. You know what I mean? Like this just like really, really catchy musical tantrum. So it's certainly like I feel like one of the best songs you could use for a moment like that. It's definitely one of my picks. It's up there on one of my picks. I was just trying to not pick the ones that everyone always picks. You know what I mean?
I'm
feel
gonna
like-
pick the one that everybody else picks.
All right, what's yours?
I'm gonna pick Ceremony just because it first of all, it's like an all-time banger. But second, I think much like the Cure songs that we covered already, it's a really hard thing, I think, to use appropriately in a setting in a film. Like, how are you going to use that, right? Like, it's a song that's like
Yeah.
decadent and speaks to like grandeur, and it just sounds like it needs more. It can be, I feel like it could be very overwhelming in any other movie. But because you've got these set pieces that live with it so well, it's kind of like it's not even allowed to be used in anything else going forward. Moratorium on using Ceremony in another film, because this
I
film
kind
owns
of
that now.
agree. I kind of agree. I feel like it is one of those usages of a song where it very much is like that's the most famous usage of it, and that's the usage that everyone sort of imprinted on the song, so now you're not allowed to use it for anything else. I
Just
feel
call
like
it
that's
up.
like, yeah, I feel like that's such a good example of like a song like that, because it's just so like so of this movie. It's just such a smart pick. Like
Yeah.
I have gushed about it in this chat about like how well I think it's used. It's just such a like just sprawling song. I have sort of this thing where like I feel like there are songs out there that feel like sort of the whole world is singing them, and that's something that I like about them. And not that there's a lot of dialogue, not dialogue, but singing in Ceremony, because there's a huge chunk of it that's obviously instrumental. But I feel like even the instrumental, it just feels like when it's playing that everyone is stopping to take it in and to
Yeah.
dance to it and to enjoy it. You know what I mean? And I think, of course, like such a huge party scene is going to have that feeling
I
anyway,
think of
but
it as a party song, kind of. I used to go
totally.
to, small anecdote. I used to go to this thing pre-pandemic at the Lodge Room in Highland Park. If anyone's familiar with the Lodge Room in Highland Park, it's in LA.
I've been there.
Um, so it's this like little venue, and for a while they had this like continuing theme party that was called like vegan goth dinner party, and you would
I love it.
go and there'd be a chamber orchestra, and the first bit of the chamber orchestra would always be them playing Ceremony, and then you would like eat and everyone would be dressed in black, and it was great, and they'd have like rotating performances, and it was all put on by the former singer of the Moving Units, if you remember that band. Anyway,
God,
so it was
so
very fun,
funny.
and I think of that kind of like you do. I think of that song as being something that's kind of like everybody is getting into it.
Yeah, like I feel like it's hard not to. It's such a good song that it just like I don't know, my brain can't picture it any other way. But just like everyone, when it comes on, everyone would want to like drop everything and let it wash over them. I just feel like it's just one of those songs. I don't know.
Shut it
It's
down
definitely
moment in the movie, and it's a great use of the song, and I feel like it's one of the more successful bits. But it's such a great soundtrack that you really could choose like 3 to 5 moments.
honestly, I there's a lot of them. Like I said, like obviously that's what's on in it is a huge one for me. I mean, I think that having like that as like the opening needle drop is just really just like kind of operating on another level that like a lot of us will never achieve because it's just so it just really sets the tone.
Yeah.
It's such a ripping song just in general. And then so to like put it in the beginning really catches everyone's eye immediately. I mean, you're just immediately glued to the film from that alone. And then when you pair it with, the imagery of her draped over, the couch, having her, her feet tended to, licking, frosting off her finger, kind of giving like a what bitch to the camera. Like, I mean, there's just such an air to the whole usage of it, that I think is just so sort of like defining, you know what I mean? It's like another moment I think in the film that feels like a defining moment for Coppola. You know what I mean? Like I think there's, throughout her career there's several moments we can, look to that we can say define, her career, and I just feel like that whole opening scene is such, a testament to that. And I think without that song, I don't know if it would play like that. I don't know if it would play that well. I don't know if we'd all love the film as much as we do. You know, I think it's a huge part of it. I think the movie would be so different without it. And that's so funny because the majority of the usage of that song is over opening credits. It's not even actually over much of the film. It's really just that key moment in the beginning. You know, that kind of almost like the whole thing sets you up to say like, oh, okay, we're not playing by the rules of conventional, you know, historical storytelling here, which is, you know, a really kind of cool way to kind of utilize that song. And I also think too, lyrics, as well. There's a bridge in Natural's Not in It that has like sort of a call and response, and call is, it's like repackaged sex is on one side and the other one is your interest, and they call back to each other. And the way that the overlap is that repackaged is really the antecedent to both sex and your interest. And so what I think is really interesting about that bridge is that even that really says something about this film too, you know, about repackaging something like the story of someone so famous that we think we all know so well because we know what happened to her, and, you know, her legacy, and she's still, after all of these years, remembered to this day and taught in the history books. You know, but Coppola is going to repackage her into something that is more palatable for you so that you're able to look at her in a different way. So I think even the choosing of that song, you know, as the opening number for this film is, you know, extremely smart too. You know, aside from it just being like a ripping song that's going to get people's attention, and really sort of set the stage for the kind of attitude that we're going to sort of kick this journey off with, you know, which of course informs the whole tone of the project. So can you tell I like that song?
I
No, I
totally
was just
can.
gonna say, can
I
you
actually
tell?
want you, I think I need you to write like an entire piece about just that song. I mean, it's a great song,
Yeah.
right? On its own right.
Good. It's just one of my favorites. I just really like love it. I honestly just like this whole movie is just such a, like, I thank it so much for showing me, you know, music of the soundtrack, because I, you know, without it may not have experienced certain songs. You know, and that's, I feel like, one of them, because Gang of Four is not quite as popular as some of the other artists used on here, and just in general of the genre, not as popular as some other, you know, rock musicians of the same time period of their, you know, their peers. So, you know, that alone is like one, you know, song that I'm so grateful to her for using, because she, you know, introduced me to it. Not like she cares, like, oh, Alexis Presquiso, I'm so glad that I introduced you particularly to
Happy
Natural's Not in
60th
It.
birthday.
I should have, instead of asking her a question at the Priscilla press conference in Venice over this past year, I should have told her my Sweet 16 story instead.
I mean, you should just shoot your shot, you know, next time.
You owe
Next
it to
time,
yourself.
You really do. You owe it to the world also.
If I ever am able to interview her, you guys can bet your booties that I will 100% tell her the whole thing. It's definitely a dream of mine. If I could get her to listen to me for 5 minutes, you know what I mean? That's definitely a dream of mine. Oh my
If you
goodness.
slip it into a mixtape, I think she'll listen to it.
Just have it be like basically like a spoken word track, like in the middle.
Right.
Just label the
It's
mixtape Natural's Not in It, and she'll listen to it.
Exactly. There we go. Perfect.
Right.
It's
It's just
perfect.
located between like some wire and some television, and yeah, okay. You know, just stick it in there. She won't see it coming.
This is inspired. I honestly would have
Change
never
your
thought
life.
of this,
Just
and
put new LCD sound system album and just send it to her.
That'll definitely get her attention. That's like, you know, when they like in the cartoons, like will like put like $1 on like a fish hook or whatever and like lure someone in. That's like essentially like, it's the same thing for like, I'm sure her, and honestly anyone of this era who like likes that music, it's like, oh my god, yeah, throw any of those tapes on a fish hook and you've got us. So I'm sure we could lure her in with that. I think it'd be easy.
So there's a instrumental track on the soundtrack by Aphex Twin called Avril 14th. And it's from an album he recorded in 2001. And it's like all instrumental, so it's not kind of the more like electronic side of Richard James. He's always kind of been like more of like he's always been kind of popular, but like kind of a niche sort of popular, right? Mm-hmm. So this instrumental shows up in this film, and honestly, like if I wasn't looking for it, like I probably would just assume it was just like some pretty little piano piece that they dug up for the movie. And then a year later, The Lonely Island sampled it for a song called I Ran So Far Away featuring Adam Levine.
Wait, really?
Yes. And then in 2010, Kanye West interpolated it for his My Dark Twisted Fantasy album. And there's some drama with that where Richard James was like, this is really bad. Like, you just outstretched it. Like, let me re-record it. And they're like, no, this is ours, not yours. And he's like, what? But anyways, so it has kind of gotten this second life. I don't know if it's 100% from Marie Antoinette, but it sure seems like it. And then I think even, this is going to sound really weird, but occasionally I will get a massage at this chain of massage places, and I will hear it in like the massage mix. I don't know if it's just like some Spotify like relaxation thing.
Sounds.
Yep.
But I'm
They're
just
like, it's soothing.
But I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this song is everywhere. And I believe it has like 100 million more streams than like the next popular Richard James Aphex Twin song, which is
that's crazy.
It's weird.
Because it would not have that long a shelf life and that big a legacy from your massage place to Kanye West if it hadn't been in this movie. Like, that because it was plucked for this movie, and that's how people heard it for the first time. That's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, because between 2001 and 2006, no one was sampling it.
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah, that's actually kind of insane. I didn't know that. And that's like pretty it has to be that's, I feel like it's almost like, not to say like that, why would someone pluck that from obscurity? Because it's not like Aphex Twin is like obscure, but like, it's just kind of like, yeah, why?
But it's like a spare piece of music you wouldn't necessarily listen to independent of that album. So it's a weird thing to have like this long a popularity. It's weird. Also, I kind of want your massage parlor's playlist now.
Yeah, we need to know what else is on there.
Maybe you should ask them.
Well, usually I'm like too relaxed, Like if it was the Marie Antoinette soundtrack, I'd be like, oh, I know all of these songs. But
yeah, you'd be like, I'm fired up.
But I'll like be like on the verge of passing out. I'll be like, hey, it's an Aphex Twin song.
You probably add it and be like, what the fuck? I don't know.
That's so interesting. It's so funny when you like hear a song somewhere in the wild that you like don't expect, like just something that, just doesn't seem like it necessarily would show up there, even if it like fits the vibe, because this clearly fits the vibe that like you're like, oh my gosh, why? I feel like that happens more often than you would think. It's just kind of funny for something like this because it is such a soundtrack song. I feel like there's a lot of them on this soundtrack where it's like these like pre-existing like sort of rock influenced pieces or rock adjacent pieces, and then you've got like your orchestral pieces and your like sort of instrumental compositions like the Aphex Twin songs. So it's kind of like half and half a little bit too, which is kind of funny because also like I feel like I still like those bits of the soundtrack like just as much. Like the orchestral piece from it plays several times, but it plays particularly in that first scene where she's getting dressed in the court for the first time. It's like sort of a hurried kind of piece of orchestral music that very much is intentional to sort of get you in the feel of what it means to be sort of doing the thing at Versailles. But like even that, like listening to it this time tonight, I was like, oh yeah, this slaps. Like as an orchestral piece of music, like I would put this on, like, you know, like doing work during the day or like studying or something like that, or like whatever, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like gives you sort of a sense of purpose, you know, particularly because this one is quite upbeat, but like, you know,
Yeah.
it has a vibe going, you know, and there is sort of a memorable quality about it, you know, which I think is interesting too, that even the music that isn't, you know, rock based, rock influenced, whatever, is very memorable, similar to the Aphex Twin song, you know?
And very chill. I feel like I feel like this is kind of the precursor to like the indie lo-fi YouTube playlist girl, right? Where you're getting
Oh
that,
my
you know?
God.
Like before there was
Yeah.
that, there was like Air and Sofia Coppola putting together these like just, you know, little like orchestral pieces. It's kind of that. Like she's really good at that, at finding things that feel like atmosphere, but also are kind of legit in their own right.
She's kind of, wow, honestly, like, I'd be kicking myself that I didn't start the indie, like, lo-fi girl YouTube stream.
I mean, I would listen to anything that she curates, so Sophia,
I agree.
still time,
She,
girl.
it would
You
be
don't even have
really
to
nice,
do, I'm sure.
right? She, I feel like so much growing up in, like, her early years did a lot of DJing and stuff, so I feel like we need her to just, like, and that was, like, very of the era. It's very early on. It's very indie sleaze, you know, like, to be like, "Oh, I'm, like, a girl of popularity in the scene or in Hollywood to some degree. I'm gonna, like, DJ parties." That's just, like, makes sense, but, I feel like we need her to, like, bring that back, like, you know, just, like, even if it's, like, sad, or it's like, oh, it's only at, like, these, like, really cool, prestigious, like, film festivals where, like, not everyone can enjoy it, but, like, you know, some people are, like, you know, posting videos on TikTok so we can at least get the vibe. I'd take
Right.
that. You know what
Well,
I mean? Like,
no, I totally know what you mean. Unfortunately, I work in advertising, so I'm already trying to figure out in my head like a way to commodify this idea. Like,
do it.
so
Do it. Find a way. We need you to make it happen, Nicole. Isn't
we
that the
both have
dream,
missions.
though?
I gotta make that happen. You gotta tell her about your 16th birthday party. So
Perfect. So, you know, we're shaking on it right now
good shake.
virtually. We will make it happen, you know, if not today,
Yeah.
soon. Essentially, it will happen. I have complete faith in the both of us.
Yeah, this is what we do. I've only been trying to get you and McGregor in an ad campaign for like 20 years.
Well, anyways, thanks Lex for being on our podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys so much for having me. It was so lovely. So nice to chat with you guys, people who like actually um you know, love the work. I can very much tell on the pod. So thank you so much for having me. It was a great combo.
Yeah. So if people want to find your work or if they want to find you, how can they do that?
You can unfortunately I'm still trucking along on the, you know, like Twitter. I refuse to call it X.
We all refuse that.
Train. Thank
Same.
you. Okay, great. So you can find me there on Instagram at Nikon America. So Nikon like the camera, America like the country. That's usually where I post everything I'm, you know, sort of writing or doing. And all of my handy dandy links and all that good stuff is all over there. So that's probably the best place. But I'm regularly publishing over at IGN, the Rap, Inverse. Those are some key places you can find my writing. But genuinely all over the map. So social is always the best place. Even though it's like, can we get away from that? It's taking over our lives. But it is the best place to find me. So
Yep, very cool. And we are also on Twitter and Instagram at SoundtrackCast. And we've got that pesky little Patreon if you guys want to support our work. And thank you once again, Lex. And maybe we'll talk some more Sofia Coppola with you some other time.
I would love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Come back anytime.